in San Francisco and raised here in Washington State. He graduated from Reed College in Portland and studied Buddhism for years in Japan. He has worked on the sea, in the woods, and as a fire lookout on Sourdough Mountain here in the North Cascades. In the late 1950s, he, along with Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, was instrumental in the Beat Generation movement. Gary Snyder has been awarded nearly every major honor given to writers. In addition to winning the Pulitzer Prize, he was awarded, within 2 weeks of each other, both the John Hay Award for Natural Writing and the prestigious Bellingham Prize for Poetry. The author of 16 books, including his latest, Danger on Peaks, his first book of new poems in over 20 years. Gary has taught at the University of California at Davis since 1985 and lives with his wife Carol in a house he built in the Yuba River watershed in the northern Sierra Nevada. Poet laureate Robert Haas said this about Gary Snyder: "His work makes us far more alive and attentive. It reaches into our deepest and best resources, heartens us to the challenges and promises of restoration to a natural place from which many of us now feel ourselves estranged." Please help me welcome Gary Snyder.
All right. I guess I'm in the right place. It's great to be up here again. I haven't been to Bellingham too many times. One of the last times I was here, 1966, going through en route to Vancouver, BC with Allen Ginsberg, it looked pretty depressed. We thought we could buy a Victorian for about $3,000, which we didn't have. But wow, it's really lively, and it's been lively for some time now. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you folks are all here, and that we're doing something with the Cascades Institute, which is a great outfit. I've been out with them up in the lake behind the Russ Dam, looking at archaeological sites with Saul and Bob Mirendorf. It's a fascinating area. I'm going to open tonight with a couple of poems by Robert Sund. I want to commend the work of Robert Sund to you, and I know many of you don't need that commendation because you know his work. As a man who lived up in this country for a good part of his life, most of his life, down in the Skagit country. My publisher, Shoemaker and Hort, brought out this year, along with my book Danger in Peaks, which is recently out, Poems from the Ish River Country by Robert Sund, which is almost like a collected poems, bringing together his earlier book Bunchgrass with later books. Sund was an acquaintance, a really interesting guy, a man who had been deeply touched by the sensibility of classical Chinese poetry and the great haiku masters of Japan, and who had been deeply touched by life in the maritime Pacific Northwest, and also the wheat ranching and working life of the east side, on the other side of the range. A difficult and sweet man at the same time. Got to crank this up here. So keep your eyes open for this new book of Sund's, Poems from Ish River Country, which is, as I said to Robert one time, like saying, river country. I recommended that he drop the river part, but he didn't. Anyway, Ish. So this is from Bunchgrass, the early collection. Each day, fewer fields remain. Fewer trucks come into the elevator. There are only 2 ranchers still harvesting. We're busy shipping out boxcars of wheat and barley to make room in the bins for the grain still to come in from the fields, and the sense of things over and done with hovers in the air around us. I write little these last few days. I have already begun not seeing the countryside around me. I will pray now twice. Once to see it gone, and now for what I give you. Let these poems be like bunch grass in ground winds, flash floods and sunlight, holding together, while one cricket sheltered here sings his single song. And a later poem by Robert Sund, In America. In America, the sea brings up rubber gloves, orange spots in the pure sand, and egg cartons and grapefruit and glass jars, mahogany 2x4s, cedar poles from Japan, strips of bark still clinging to them, immense old cedar logs logged long ago, peeled fur, old shoes, boom logs with rusty chains, wire cable spools, legs of tables, pillows, whiskey bottles, bottles with names in fading black paint. I say it anyway. Light bulbs, butt ends of logs stamped with the codes of Crown Silverback, Warehouse, and Georgia Pacific. Vinegar bottles with Russian labels, nylon rope, blue, gaudy, green, yellow, and orange. And garbage from fishermen, grapefruit halves mostly, and instant coffee jars, overboard at night, washed up into this pure morning. You all seen that. And a wonderful afterword to this book, Poems from East River Country, by Tim McNulty. A really fine and astute appreciation of Robert Sund's work. He died in the year 2001. Another poet wrote these 2 poems in 1944. 2 poems by Robinson Jeffers from World War II. This is called Eagle Valor, Chicken Mind. Unhappy country, what wings you have. Even here, nothing important to protect. And ocean far from the nearest enemy. What a cloud of bombers amazes the coast mountain. What a hornet swarm of fighters. And day and night the guns practicing. Unhappy, eagle wings and beak, chicken brain. Weep. Is it frequent in human affairs? Weep for the terrible magnificence of the means and the ridiculous incompetence of the reasons, the bloody and shabby pathos of the result. Do we have to live through all this again? Another one from that time, Ink Sack of Robinson Jeffers. The squid, frightened or angry, shoots darkness out of her ink sac. The fighting destroyer throws out a smoke screen. And fighting governments produce lies. But squid and warship do it to confuse the enemy. Governments mostly to stupefy their own people. It might be better to let the roof burn and the walls crash than save a nation with floods of excrement. Jeffers, our somewhat dour prophet. Well, this evening I'm going to read from my recent collection called Danger on Peaks, selections from it. After finishing a book that took me 40 years, called Mountains and Rivers Without End, back in 1996, I thought that probably I didn't have to write any more poems. And I felt just fine about that. But more poems kind of sneaked up with me. I started writing some little tiny short poems for fun and trying that out with some of my students. And then I found myself being drawn into a larger picture. It started with a field trip to Mount St. Helens that I took in the year 2000 with a friend from Corvallis, Oregon, who's a volcanologist, geologist, and forest service research soil specialist named Fred Swanson. Fred Swanson had been studying and monitoring Mount St. Helens from before the eruption, and then has been on the team of scientists who have regularly watched it and checked it out ever since. So it was really educational to go there with him in the year 2000. I did that with the powerful memory of my first climb of the mountain, Mount St. Helens, in 1945, when I was 15 years old. Luit, as we call it down in the Columbia River country, Luit, from the Sahaptin language group, where they would have called it Lawaitla. Except the white folks couldn't say that. So they said Luit, Lawaitla, meaning smoky. This sequence of poems starts with Mount St. Helens and the atomic bombs dropped on Japan in 1945. Arcs through the eruption of St. Helens in 1980, and my own assessment of the area around the mountain in the year 2000, and comes to rest in the destruction of the World Trade Towers. Some major 20th, 21st century explosions. And I'm going to read selections that weave some of that together, but by no means all of it. The day I first climbed Mount St. Helens was August 13, 1945. Spirit Lake was far from the cities of the valley, and news came slow. Though the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima August 6th, and the second dropped on Nagasaki August 9th, photographs did not appear in the Portland Oregonian until August 12th. Those papers must have been driven into Spirit Lake on the 13th. Early the morning of the 14th, I walked over to the lodge to check the bulletin board. There were whole pages of the paper pinned up, photos of a blasted city from the air. The estimate of 150,000 dead in Hiroshima alone. The American scientist quoted saying, "Nothing will grow there again for 70 years. The morning sun on my shoulders, the fir forest smell, and the big tree shadows, feet in thin moccasins feeling the ground, and my heart still one with the snow peak mountain at my back. Horrified? Blaming scientists and politicians and the governments of the world, I swore a vow to myself, something like, by the purity and beauty and permanence of Mount St. Helens, I will fight against this cruel, destructive power and those who would seek to use it for all my life. Skipping ahead to into the year 2000, the last in this first series, called Pearly Everlasting. Walk a trail down to the old Spirit Lake, mountain ash and elderberries red, old growth, log bodies blown about, whacked down, tumbled in the new ash waddies, root mats tipped up, veiled in tall straight fireweed, fields of prone logs laid by blast, inline north-south, down and silvery, limbless, barkless poles, clear to the alpine ridgetop. All you see is toothpicks of dead trees. Thousands of summers at detritus cycle rest. Hard and dry in the sun, the long life of the down tree yet to go, bedded in bushes of pearly everlasting, dense white flowers, saplings of bushy vibrant silver fir. The creek here once was called Harmony Falls, the pristine mountain just a little battered now, the smooth dome gone, ragged crown. The lake was shady yin, now blinding water mirror of the sky. Remembering days of fir and hemlock, no blame to magma or the mountain. And sit on a clean down log at the lake's edge, the water dark as tea. I had asked Mount St. Helens for help the day I climbed it. So, seems she did. The trees all lying flat like this, like after that big party Siddhartha went to on the night he left the home for good. A crowd of young friends whipped from sexy dancing. Dozens crashed out on the floor. Angelic boys and girls sleeping it off. A palace orgy of the gods. But what we see is blast zone, sprinkled with clustered white flowers. Do not be tricked by human-centered views, says Dogen. And Siddhartha looks it over, slips away for another forest to really get right down on life and death. If you ask for help, it comes. But not in any way you'd ever know. Thank you, Luit, Laurelatla, Smoky Ma, Gracias, Shia Shia, Grace. Closing this section, enjoy the day. One morning, on a ridgetop east of Luit, after Camp Stove Coffee, looking at the youthful old volcano, breathing steam and sulfur, sunrise lava, bowls of snow, went up behind a mountain hemlock, asked my old advisors where they lay, "What's going on?" They say, "New friends and dear sweet old tree ghosts, here we are again. Enjoy the day." Never thought I'd be reading in Bellingham High School auditorium. It's great. A couple of short poems. Yet older matters. A rain of black rocks out of space onto deep blue ice fields in Antarctica. 9,000 feet high, scattered for miles, crunched inside, yet older matter from times before our very sun. From a conversation with the geologist Eldridge Morse and the science fiction writer Kim Stanley Robinson, referring to how there are areas in Antarctica on big ice sheets where there are a lot of little black rocks. We know, in this case, they had to come from outer space. Where else would they have come from? And so when studied and deeply analyzed, some of them have matter in them that was created before our solar system was created. So that's pretty old. Flowers in the night sky, being on alert for forest fires and whatever else might happen. As a longtime homesteader in the Sierra Nevada of Northern California at the 3,000-foot elevation Ponderosa Pine Forest, out beyond the reach of power grid electric lines and no snowplows, dirt roads, the life we live. Flowers in the night sky. I thought, forest fires burning to the north. Yellow Nomex jacket thrown into the cab, hard hat, boots. I gunned the truck up the dirt road, scrambling, and came out on a flat stretch with a view. Shimmering blue-green streamers and a red glow down the sky. Stop. Storms on the sun. Solar winds going by. That is the night of the red aurora borealis that was seen as far south as Northern California in April of 2001. So much red in the northern half of the sky that I thought it was a fire. In April, how stupid can you get? Or hysterical? No. Well, a little series here called Daily Life. This series of poems has its own, this sequence has its own interconnections and is experimental in a sense, in that I have adopted several different voices, which are all my own voice, of course, without trying to sound like I'm too smart, even. And daily life is daily life. Here's the first poem and the last poem that I ever wrote for my mother, called Winter Lament. My mother, Lois Wilkie Snyder Hennessy, was born in Palestine, Texas. Her parents broke up and her mother moved her up here when she was in her first year of high school to Seattle, where she went to Queen Anne High, and then entered the University of Washington in 1921, and had to quit after 2 years. Always very poor and very afraid of poverty. She lived to be 98, and actually just died in August of this year. I gather from her own stories about her own life that she was difficult with everybody, everywhere, all her life. And also was completely assured of her own intelligence and talent, regardless. And that may well have been true. Winter Lament. Tree over and down. Yeah, I should say, The last 30 years of her life, she lived in Grass Valley, California, only 25 miles from my place, up in the backcountry ridges. So I could keep an eye on her, see her at least once a week. Tree over and down, its root rot clear to the air, dirt tilted, trunk limbs and twiglets crashed on my mother's driveway. Her car is barricaded up by the house. She called last night. I can't get out. I left at dawn, freezing and clear, a scatter of light snow from last week still, and my little steel arborist's chainsaw, a thrasher, canvas knapsack of saw gear, and head for town, fishtailing ice slicks. She's in the yard in a mustard knit hat and a shawl, cerise, from her prize heap of woolens from the world's goodwills. The trees, rotten limbs and whippy sprouts, both in a damn near dead old frame. My mother, 87 still then, still drives and worries the danger, but the snarl of the saw chases her back into the house. In the fresh, clear air, I move with the limbs and the trunk. They crash in a sequence and piled as it goes, so firewood rounds here and the brush pile there rake down the drive for her car in 3 hours. Inside, where it's all too hot, drink chocolate and eat black bread with smoked oysters. Lois goes over her memory of my jobs as a youth that made me do this kind of work. When I'm really, she says, so intellectual, but you always worked hard as a kid. And she tells me a story, herself, 17, part-time clerk in a store in Seattle. The boss called her in for a scolding. How come you shopped there? A competitor's place. Her sister worked there, my Aunt Helen, who could give her a discount as good as what they had here. The boss said, okay, that's okay then. And Lois said, also, it's time for a raise. I asked, did you get it? I did. So many hours at this chair, hearing tales of the years. I was skinny, so thin, with her great weight now. Thank you, son, for the tree. You did it quick, too. The neighbors will say, he came right away. Well, I needed a change. A few rounds of sound almond wood. Maybe my craft friend Holly will want them. You won't be just firewood. Be a bowl or a salad fork. Old down almond tree. Waiting for a ride. At this point, it should be dedicated to my friend Gary Holthouse, who was living in Texas at the time. Before that, he lived 17 years in Alaska. I flew into Austin, Texas, to the airport there, and he was supposed to pick me up, but he was at least 45 minutes late, which gave me some time to reflect on my life. Standing at the baggage, passing time, Austin, Texas airport. My ride hasn't come yet. My former wife is making websites for her home. One son is seldom seen. The other one and his wife have a boy and a girl of their own. My wife and stepdaughter are spending weekdays in town so that she can get to high school. My mother, 96, still lives alone, and she's in town too. Always gets her sanity back just in time. My former wife has become a unique poem. Most of my work, such as it is done. Autumn full moon was October 2nd this year. I ate a mooncake, slept out on the deck, white light beaming through the black boughs of the pine, owl hoots and rattling antlers, castor and pollux rising strong. It's good to know that the pole star drifts, and that even our present night sky slips away. Not that I'll see it. Or maybe I will, much later. Sometime, some far time, walking the spirit path in the sky. That long walk of spirits where you fall right back into the narrow, painful passageway of the bardo. Squeeze your little skull, and there you are again, waiting for your ride. Dr. Coyote, when he had a problem, took a dump on the grass, asked his turds where they lay what to do. They gave him good advice. He'd always say, "That's just what I thought too," and do it, and go his way. I love applause, but you can say it the longest. So keep an eye on that guy, Dr. Coyote. Incidentally, that little motif is found throughout Coyote Tales all over the West. Dr. Coyote's advisors. How many? This is a series of medium-sized small poems called Steady, they say. How many? Australia. A group of girls at a corroboree. In Lapland, reindeer herd girls. In China, the yak tail. Greece, the 7 daughters, sisters, or the sailing stars. A cluster of faint stars in Taurus, the Pleiades. Name of a car in Japan, Subaru. In Mayan, a fistful of boys. Next time you look at a Subaru, look at the hood ornament. You'll see a little cluster of stars. I don't know why they have never told me where to put that. It's funny, isn't it? To all the girls whose ears I pierced back then. For Maggie Brown Kohler, among others. She was only 8. Sometimes we remember that moment. You stood there, attentive with clothespins, dangling, setting a bloodless dimple in each lobe, as I searched for a cork and the right-sized needle, and followed the quick pierce with a small gold hoop, the only guy with an earring back then. It didn't hurt that much. A sweetly earnest child and a crazy country guy with an earring and a great green cast eye, and even then, this point. I first got a pierced ear in 1947, when I shipped out to South America, and always managed to keep it. After that, so that in the late 40s and the early 50s, all the young ladies had decided to get their ears pierced. And I was the only person to apply to for a while. So I did a lot of business. And then the earring salespeople started piercing them for you already. Snow flies, burn brush, shut down. A wide line of men in the open pine woods, diesel torches, dripping flame, lava soil, frost on the sagebrush, loggers walking from brush pile to brush pile, dark sky reddish from brush piles burning. At Sidwalter Butte, 3 men on horseback, torches mounted on slender lances, crisscrossing miles of buttes and canyons. Hundreds of brush piles flee. Steady, light snow. End of the season, Warm Springs, Oregon, 1954. For Philip Zinshin Whalen, died 26th June 2002. I should say, welcome to everybody from the Upper Skagit tonight. Folks from Highland, New Halem, old lookouts, new lookouts, old backcountry scramblers. Phil Whalen, of course, was on Salt Mountain Lookout a season or two. I was on Crater one season and on Sourdough another season. It's all in John Suter's book, Poets on the Peaks, which is actually a nifty book. Philip died in June of 2002, having become, in the latter years of his life, after having first been an Irish kid born in the Dalles, Oregon, as he said, in an Irish doily Catholic house. And then a nerd in the Air Force in World War II, where they gave him some kind of a desk job. And then a student at Reed College, where I met him as the most brilliant literary mind I ever came across. And ended up being a Soto Zen priest and abbot of a little temple in Noe Valley, California, with a mission for young men who are dying of AIDS. So for Philip Zinshin Whalen and for 33 pine trees. Load of logs on, chains cinched down and double-checked. The truck heads slowly up the hill. I bow, namaste, and farewell. These ponderosa pine, whose air and rain and sun we shared for 30 years. Struck by beetles, needles turning rusty brown and moving on. Decking, shelving, siding, stringers, studs, and joists. I will think of you, pines from this mountain, as you shelter people in the valley, years to come. Steady, they say. Clambering up the rocks of a dry-wash gully, warped sandstone by the San Juan River. Look north to stony mountains, shifting clouds and sun. Despair at how the human world goes down. Consult my old advisors. Steady, they say, today. For Carol. The title, Danger and Peace, is not necessarily to be taken as the danger that you might encounter mountaineering, or even the danger of some old volcano suddenly blowing up. It might also mean other things. For Carol, I first saw her in the Zendo at mealtime, unwrapping bowls, head forward, folding back the cloth. As server, I was kneeling to fill 3 sets of bowls each time, up the line. Her lithe leg, proud, skeptical, passionate, trained by the heights, by the danger on peaks. The heights trained her at one point when she had a daughter 2 years old, and was leading a 5th class climb in Yosemite, and got out beyond protection and realized she didn't know how to get back. And then she said to herself, "Hey, I've got a daughter at home." It changed her style a bit after that. The next little group I'm going to be reading from is called Dust in the Wind. And this is a series of poems with a prose introduction and then a short poem in each case. Influenced by the Japanese tradition of haibun, which means hai for haiku, bun means prose. It means poem prose. It actually means poem with a prose block and then a short poem, which in Japan would be a traditional haiku. But I'm not quite doing it that way. So I pay my respects to Basho and others here who explored this possibility, and I love working with it. One day in late summer, in the early 90s, I had lunch with my old friend Jack Hogan, ex-Longshore Union worker, activist of San Francisco, at a restaurant in my small Sierra town. The owner of the restaurant had recently bought and torn down the adjoining brick building, which had been in its time a secondhand bookstore called 3 R's, run by a puckish ex-professor. Our lunch table in the patio was right where his counter had been. Jack was married to my sister once. We all hung out in North Beach back in the 50s, but now he lives in Mexico. This present moment that lives on to become long ago. Baking bread, warm sun of a farmyard, a huge old chestnut tree. Just yesterday, the woman said, been raided by wild rhesus monkeys. We had boar meat, inoshishi, stewed with chestnuts for lunch. Deer, boar, monkeys, foxes in these mountains, and lots of dams and little trucks on narrow winding roads. 4 hours from Tokyo, brightly colored work clothes, living on abandoned farms, fighting concrete dams. I am hippie, says this woman, baking bread. California laurel. The botanist told us over by Davis Lumber, between house furnishings and plumbing, there is a Grecian laurel growing. Not much smell, but that's the one that poets wore. Now, California laurel is not a laurel. It can drive off bugs or season a sauce, and it really clears your sinus if you take a deep breath. Crushed leaves The smell reminds me of Annie by the Big Sur River. She camped under laurel trees all one summer, eating brown rice, naked, doing yoga, her chanting her way deep breath. No shadow. It's for Dean Swickard, the head of the Central California Folsom Office Bureau of Land Management. Best federal land manager I ever met. And that's saying a lot. My friend Dean took me into the Yuba gold fields. That's at the lower Yuba River outflow where it enters the Sacramento Valley flatlands, a mile-wide stretch between grass and blue oak. It goes on for 10 miles. Here is where the mining tailings got dropped off by the wandering riverbed of the 70s, of the 1870s, 40 miles downstream from where the giant hoses washed them off Sierra slopes. And we were walking on blue, lupin-covered, rounded, 100-foot gravel hills till we stood over the springtime rush of water and watched a female osprey hunting along the main river channel. Her flight shot up, down, all sides. Suddenly she fell feet first into the water and emerged with a fish in her claws. Maybe fooling the fish by zigzagging so. No hawk shadow. Carol said later, that's like trying to do zazen without yourself entering into it. Standing on a gravel hill by the lower Yuba River, can see down west a giant Air Force cargo plane from Beale, hang gliding down to land, strangely slow over the tumbled, drenched out gold fields, practice run, shadow of a cargo jet, soon gone, no shadow of an osprey, still here. The Acropolis, back when? Taula Siete meets me on the street. She translates into Greek from German and Italian. She and I are off to the Acropolis. We walk through winding back streets and around the east end to the south side walls, go west past the semi-standing Theater of Dionysius, and reach up and pick some rotten shriveled olives. They are so bitter. Up the steps to an outlook ledge, a glint of sunshine, and then we are above Athens. The modern city starts to fade. Taula's friend arrives and leads us on to steeper steps past the small shrine to the bear girl Artemis, and into the territory of big, clean slabs, Pentelian marble, old stone newly stacked, and littles perched on blocks, old talus stubble. We walk the porch edge of the soaring Parthenon, sacred to gray-eyed Athena, slip into the restoration office by the cliff for tea. He is the director of the restoration project for the whole show, especially the Parthenon, Tasso Tanolas. He explicates the structures for me, ruin by ruin, and explains the calibrated aesthetics of just leaving it be. The whole city racketing around below. Chilly breeze. Now see the housecat tribe going wild in the scattered heaps of big stone blocks. This whole hill, a palimpsest, Tasso says, of buildings, Neolithic, Mycenaean, Heraclean, and after. And I'm thinking, here is a good place for a bivouac. There is a spring, they say, just a few yards down. People must have camped here when, lifetimes ago. Drawn to this rock, I climbed it, watched the clouds and the moon, slept the night, dreamed of a gray-eyed girl on this rocky hill. No buildings then. To go. Slopes of grassy mountains rise steep up from the narrow town of Gorman, north of LA on the route of the 5. Clusters of bush and spans of spring wildflowers in bloom. California poppy, lupin, paintbrush, fiddlebacks, blue, orange, and yellow, arching across the slopes above. Afternoon angle to the sun. Gorman, painted on a hillside water tower. At Carl's Jr. in Gorman, getting coffee, I say to the truck driver, just parked on a slant and walked in behind me, "Hey, those things are really huge. How the hell do you drive them?" He says, "They're really easy." "Still, you have to find a place to park." He laughs. "Yeah, you do." Heading north toward Tejon Pass, humming, ant column, vehicles, 6, 8 lanes wide, curving through a gap in the vertical cow-flank tan mountains, tops out of sight, sprinkled with spring flowers. Big rig parked by the water tower, sun, cars, hills, coffee, all to go. Corinthia, Corinne Snyder Lowry, my sister, 1932 to 2002. She was on the Marin County Grand Jury heading to a meeting, driving south of Petaluma on the 101. The pickup ahead of her lost a grass mower off the back. She pulled onto the shoulder and walked right out into the lane to take it off. That had always been her way. Struck by a speedy car and instant death. White egrets standing there, always standing there at the crossing on the Petaluma River. After Bamiyan. You know, the Bamiyan Valley in northeastern Afghanistan was part of the route of the Silk Route. And the whole route connected China to Turkey, and from Turkey by ship to Rome in the latter years of the Roman Empire. A fabulous trade was going on. What is now Afghanistan was for many centuries a Buddhist country with connections both to Greece and to India. In the Bamiyan Valley, on the north wall of cliffs, were several enormous carved stone Buddha figures, the largest Buddha figures that had ever been made. And they were destroyed by the Taliban in the spring of 2001. as part of their campaign against iconography, representation of figures, and probably they thought of the Buddha figures as idols, which of course is a mistaken way of reading or understanding what Buddha figures are. The whole Occidental world, not just the Muslims, but the rest of the Occidental world, tended to dismiss Hinduism and Buddhism simply as idolatry, without understanding how these representations worked for deeper purposes. Anyway, this is a prose poem exploration of some of that, and the whole section here that I'm now going to read with and finish with is called After Bamiyan. March 2001. The Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Xuanzang described the giant, gleaming, painted, carved-out Buddhas standing in their stone cave niches at the edge of the Bamiyan Valley as he passed through there on foot on his way to India in the 7th century. Last week, they were blown up by the Taliban. Not just by the Taliban, but by woman and nature-denying authoritarian worldviews that go back much farther than Abraham. Dennis Dutton sent this poem around. Not even under mortar fire do they flinch. The Buddhas of Bamiyan take refuge in the dust. May we keep our minds clear and calm and in the present moment and honor the dust. April 2001. Letter from a man who writes about Buddhism. Dear Gary, well, yes, but the manifest Dharma is intra-samsaric and it will decay. R. I wrote back. Ah, yes, impermanence. But this is never a reason to let compassion and focus slide, or to pass off the sufferings of others, because they are merely impermanent beings. Issa's haiku goes, Tsuyu no yo wa, Tsuyu no yo nagara, Sari nagara. This dewdrop world is but a dewdrop world. And yet, that and yet is our perennial practice, and maybe the root of the Dharma. A person who should know better wrote, many credulous and sentimental Westerners, I suspect, were upset by the destruction of the Afghan Buddha figures because they believed that so-called Eastern religion is more tender-hearted and less dogmatic. So, is nothing sacred? Only respect for human life and culture, which requires no divine sanction and no priesthood to inculcate it. The foolish veneration of holy places and holy texts remains a principal obstacle to that simple realization. This is another case of blame the victim, I answered. Buddhism is not on trial here. The Bamiyan statues are part of human life and culture. They are works of art being destroyed by idolaters of the book. Is there anything credulous in respecting the art and religious culture of the past? Counting on the tender-heartedness of most Buddhists, you can feel safe in trashing the Bamiyan figures as though the Taliban wasn't doing a good enough job. I doubt you would have the nerve to call for launching a little missile at the Kaaba. There aren't people who would put a hit on you, and you know it. That was Christopher Hitchens, who used to write for The Nation. Now he's hiding out in Atherton with rich people. September 2001. The men and women who died at the World Trade Center, together with the Buddhists of Burma, take refuge in the dust. Loose on earth, a tiny spark, or the slow-moving glow on a fuse, creeping toward where ergs held close. In petrol, saltpeter, mine gas, buzzing minerals in the ground are waiting, held tight in a few hard words, in a dark mood, in an old shame. Humanity, said Jeffers, is like a quick explosion on the planet. We're loose on Earth. 500,000 years, our weird blast spreading. And after, rubble. Millennia to weather, soften, fragment, sprout, and green again. Falling from a height, holding hands. This refers, of course, to that photograph that somebody took, caught, of two people falling from the top of one of the trade towers, leaping out and holding hands as they fell. A choice they made to fall together. Falling from a height, holding hands. What was that? Storms of flying glass and billowing flames. A clear day to the far sky. Better than burning. Hold hands. We will be two peregrines diving all the way down. This whole section ends with two more poems. I'm going to read both of them because they didn't complete it. The Kannon of Asakusa, Sensoji, Shortgrass Temple, Sumida River. At the Buddha Hall of Sensoji, hundreds of worshippers surge up the high stone steps into the hall, dropping coins in the bin. Look into the black and gold chamber, somewhere a statue of Kannon, Yuan Yin, goddess of mercy, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, peace and compassion for all in this world realm, this particular time. Old and young people swirl by, incense in clouds. We follow the flow out the south side steps, white gravels, and back down the pilgrim stone walkway that leads here, lined with street shops and stalls, packed with babies in strollers, old folks in wheelchairs, girls in their tank tops, back to the gate at the entrance. Gold Dragon Mountain, Thunder Gate, and tree pillars, sweeping tile eaves, back out to the streets, traffic, police, taxis, tempura restaurants of Edo. Cross to the Riverside Park space, men cross-legged on cardboard under the shade tree, and step into the long, slender riverboat water bus that runs down the Sumida River. I came here unwitting the right way, ascending the Sumidagawa, approaching Sensoji from the sea, under the Thunder Gate, walking the pilgrim path, climbing the steps to Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva of compassion, asking, please guide us through samsara. Form, sensation, thought, impulse, consciousness are not born, not destroyed, without gain, without loss. No hindrance, thus no fear. For all beings, living or not, beings or not, inside or outside of time. Envoy, final. A turning verse for the billions of beings. We have spoken again the unknown words of the spell that purifies the world, turning its virtue and power back over to those who died in wars, in the fields, on the seas, and to the billions of spirits in the realms of form, of no form, or the realm of hot desire. Hail all true and grounded beings in all directions, in the realms of form, of no form, or of hot desire. Hail all noble, woke-up, big-heart beings. Hail great wisdom of the path that goes beyond. Maha Prajna Paramita. From the Chinese. Thank you.